Did you ever wonder why God lets you go through so much pain? Sometimes it's hard to believe that God is with you, or that He's faithful, or that He loves you when He lets us go through so much pain. And you can't help but wonder why you hurt so much. I mean, if God is with us and He won't forsake us, and He loved us, why would He let us go through so much pain? My friend, I understand these feelings. More than once I've had these doubts. I've been in those storms where it seems like it's one arrow after another being thrown at me, and God's just standing there watching. But through many painful experiences, I began to see why God lets us go through so much pain. Let me show you a few passages in 1 Peter that may shed some light on this. 1 Peter 4:19 says, "Therefore let those who suffer according to the will of God commit their souls to Him in doing good as to a faithful Creator." Sometimes it's the will of God for us to suffer. It was the will of God for Christ to suffer, and the suffering of Christ led to our salvation. By our standards, it would seem like God didn't know what He was doing. But time and time again, God shows us that His ways are far above our ways. Therefore, we commit ourselves to Him because He is faithful. Even if we are faithless, He remains faithful. He cannot deny Himself. Now, maybe you're having doubts that God is with you and faithful when He lets you suffer, even though you're trying your hardest to do good and please Him. After all, in the previous chapter, in 1 Peter, it tells us, "He who would love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and His ears are open to the prayers. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil." So if we do all these things and still suffer, where does that leave us? This is the question that has caused so many to leave the faith. We say, if God still lets us suffer, even though we're trying so hard to please Him, then either He's distant or uncaring, or He doesn't exist. I can't tell you how many times I've struggled with these doubts. So what of it? Is God still faithful when He lets good people suffer? Does the Bible really have answers? Let's see. 1 Peter 3:14 and 17 says, "But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you are blessed. And do not be afraid of their threats, nor be troubled." Then it says, "For it is better, if it is the will of God, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil." This verse is telling us that even if we don't suffer for doing evil, sometimes it's God's will for us to suffer for doing good. And that can be a good thing. How so? Let me show you one final verse in 1 Peter. 1 Peter 4, verse 1 and 2. "Therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves with the same mind. For he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he should no longer live the rest of his time in the flesh for the lusts of men, but for the will of God." Did you catch it? Whoever has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. Why does God let those who do good suffer? So they no longer are controlled by the power of sin. You see, if we didn't suffer, then would we really want to live for God? Do you think that comes naturally to us? No. Our natural tendency is to live for ourselves, to seek after our own desires. But where does that leave us? Where does seeking our own satisfaction apart from God lead us? Nowhere. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away in the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. This is why God lets us suffer. So we live our lives for what truly matters, the things that have eternal value. Now you may be thinking, well, it would be easier to live for God if suffering didn't get in our way. But did you ever consider that the suffering gets in our way? So we stop living for our own desires that get in the way of God's? More than once I've told God that it would be easier to serve Him if I could walk, or even just had stronger arms. But time and time again, He has revealed to me that if I didn't suffer, then I wouldn't know the heart of Christ. Think about it. How can I know love unless I face hate? How can I experience peace unless I go through a storm? How can I be humble unless my pride is crushed? Do you understand what I'm saying here? God still has a plan, even in the midst of suffering. You may not understand why you're suffering right now, but it's up to you to trust that God's going to use this for something greater than you ever knew, something better than you had planned in the first place. So don't give up when you're suffering. God's going to use this for good. Just trust Him, my friend. You're going to get through this.